It was Halloween night in Black Pine, a town wrapped in legends darker than the thick pines that surrounded it. The kind of town where shadows linger too long and whispers in the wind make you glance over your shoulder. My family had always been tethered to its history, bound by blood and tragedy to the old roadside inn that sat crumbling on the outskirts. My great-grandparents had run the place until something unspoken forced them to abandon it. No one liked to talk about what happened, not even my parents. That night, our family decided to return to the inn, not for nostalgia, but out of necessity. My uncle insisted there was a family heirloom left behind when the inn was hastily shut down. An antique silver necklace said to bring good fortune. He was obsessed with finding it, and his obsession had infected us all. The inn loomed against the night sky, its windows like empty sockets staring into the abyss. The air around it seemed colder, heavier, as though the place was breathing its own dark life. My cousin Jason, my sister Abby, and I were tasked with venturing inside. Jason, always the brave one, or the foolhardy one, depending on how you saw it, led the way. He'd also been the one to hear the rumors of treasure hidden in the attic. What kind of treasure? I'd asked, half intrigued, half skeptical. Old coins, jewels, maybe even gold bars. Jason had said with a grin that bordered on manic. People didn't trust banks back then. The promise of treasure was enough to draw us inside. Armed with flashlights and a crowbar for good measure, we stepped into the inn. The air was stale, thick with the scent of decay and forgotten memories. Each creak of the floorboards echoed like a gunshot in the eerie silence. The ground floor was uneventful. Overturned chairs, broken tables, and a layer of dust so thick it muted even our footsteps. But the attic was a different story. Jason insisted the heirloom was up there, and we followed him up the narrow staircase, each step groaning under our weight. The moment we reached the top, the air changed. It was colder, and every sound seemed muffled, as if the space existed apart from the rest of the world. "Start looking," Jason said, already sifting through a pile of dusty trunks in one corner. Abby and I exchanged uneasy glances, but did as we were told. The attic was a hoarder's paradise. Crates, old furniture, and forgotten relics piled haphazardly. Abby and I focused on the trunks closest to the stairs. Most of what we found was junk, moth-eaten clothes, faded photographs, and tarnished silverware. Jason, meanwhile, ventured deeper into the shadows, drawn by something none of us could see. "Hey, guys!" Jason's voice rang out from the far corner. "I think I found it." Abby and I turned toward him, but before we could take a step, the attic seemed to shift. The air grew impossibly heavy, pressing down on us. A low creak filled the room, and our flashlights flickered. Then Jason screamed. We ran to where we'd last seen him, but he was gone. All that remained was an old rocking chair, swaying back and forth as if someone invisible sat in it. The rhythmic creak was hypnotic, almost soothing, until a faint humming sound joined it. A woman's voice, soft at first, then growing louder, filling the room like a rising tide. The melody was strange, haunting, and it made my skin crawl. Abby grabbed my arm, her nails digging into my skin. "He was just here," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Jason?" I called, my voice cracking. No answer, only the chair, rocking faster now, and the humming, which was no longer a melody but a cacophony of disjointed notes. The attic door slammed shut behind us, and the room plunged into darkness. Abby screamed, and I fumbled with my flashlight, desperate for its beam of light. When it finally flickered back to life, the attic was empty. The rocking chair was still, and the humming had stopped. We banged on the door, yelling for our parents, but it felt like hours before it creaked open. My parents stood there, their faces pale with anger and worry. "What the hell were you doing up here?" my dad demanded. "Jason," I stammered, but my words died in my throat. Jason was gone. The police were called, and a search party was organized. They combed through the inn and the surrounding woods, but there was no trace of him. The official explanation was that Jason had fallen through a weak floorboard and fled into the forest, disoriented and injured. But I knew better. We all did. For weeks, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that rocking chair and heard that haunting hum. Abby refused to talk about it, burying herself in silence. My parent avoided the topic entirely, as if ignoring it would make it go away. But it didn't. Months turned into years, and the inn remained abandoned, a scar on the town's history. No one dared go near it, but I couldn't let it go. I spent countless nights researching the inn's past, hoping to find some clue about what had happened to Jason. That's when I discovered the story of Margaret Ellison, a woman who had worked at the inn decades ago. She was accused of witchcraft after several guests went missing and was lynched by a mob in the woods behind the building. Her body was never found, but her rocking chair remained in the attic. The rumors said her spirit lingered, luring people into the attic with promises of riches and treasure. Once they entered, they were never seen again. I tried to tell my family, but they dismissed it as superstition. Even Abby, who had been there, refused to listen. But I know what I saw, what I heard, and every Halloween, I dream of that attic, of the rocking chair and the humming. I dream of Jason calling out to us, his voice growing fainter and fainter until it's drowned out by her song. They say some things are better left forgotten. But how can you forget when the past refuses to let you go? Halloween was supposed to be a cheerful time at my uncle's place. My dad and I had come to celebrate with Uncle James and his new wife, Millie. The day was filled with laughter and the smell of roasted pumpkins, but that night, something was different. It wasn't just a chill in the air or the eerie whisper of the wind. There was something off about the house, something that made my skin crawl. Uncle James had bought the old orphanage in the heart of Shadow Hill, with grand plans to transform it into a mansion. As a kid, I had always been fascinated by the tales of the abandoned orphanage, how the windows of the old building seemed to always be watching, how the land surrounding it was steeped in strange stories. But I hadn't expected the building to feel so oppressive once we arrived. Despite my uncle's best efforts to restore the house, the place felt like it was holding its breath, like it was waiting for something that didn't belong. Millie, my uncle's new wife, was the first to notice it. She smiled too much, spoke too kindly. Her politeness felt like a mask, one that didn't quite fit. She was always watching me, her eyes following me when she thought I wasn't paying attention. At first, I thought it was just me being paranoid, but the unease never left. It only grew stronger the longer we stayed at Shadow Hill. That night, long after the usual Halloween festivities had ended, I found myself awake in my room. The wind had picked up, rattling the old windows. I couldn't sleep. Something in the house kept me on edge. And then I heard it, the faint sound of shuffling footsteps from downstairs. I strained to listen, my heart pounding in my chest. Who would be awake at this hour? I couldn't resist. I slipped out of bed, careful not to make a sound, and crept down the hallway. The house seemed to stretch out before me in an eerie silence. As I reached the top of the stairs, I froze. A shadow moved in the darkened hallway below, and I realized it was Millie. She stood in the main hall, her face obscured by the darkness. Her lips moved, but no sound came. I leaned in closer, my curiosity getting the better of me. She was whispering something, words I couldn't make out. And then, as though in response to her voice, strange things began to happen. The old toys scattered across the floor started to move. The rocking horse near the entrance creaked to life, rocking slowly back and forth, though no one was near it. A chair slid across the floor, scraping against the wood. The dusty old furniture seemed to shift as though an invisible hand was pushing it. It was as if the house was reacting to her presence, to whatever dark words she was muttering in the shadows. Millie didn't seem to notice the movement, but she reached into my uncle's personal drawer at the far end of the hallway. She pulled out his prized pocket watch in a small envelope, hidden beneath the drawer's false bottom. The envelope was thick, stuffed with cash. I had never seen my uncle's face turn as pale as it did when he first received that watch from his late father. It was something precious to him, something he didn't share with anyone. But Millie, she took it without hesitation. As she turned to leave, I couldn't breathe. I had been standing there too long. I had to move, to hide. But before I could retreat, she turned toward me, her eyes locking onto mine. There was no smile, no kindness, just a dark glint in her eyes. "What are you doing awake?" she hissed, her voice low and harsh. far removed from the sweetness she always wore. I darted back to my room, my heart pounding so loudly I thought it might burst. I slammed the door behind me, trying to steady my breathing, but it wasn't over. The doorknob rattled, and a chill ran down my spine. There was no mistaking it. Someone was outside. "Clara." Millie's voice whispered through the door, muffled but distinct. They know what you saw." I backed away from the door, my mind racing. What did she mean? What was she talking about? But before I could think any further, I heard her voice again, this time muttering strange, incomprehensible words. The sound was unsettling, like a chant, something ancient. I wanted to call out to my dad to wake him up, but I couldn't move. Fear had frozen me in place. The night passed slowly, each minute dragging on like an eternity. I barely slept, my eyes fixed on the door, waiting for it to open, but the morning light eventually crept in and I was still alive, still trapped in that house. I couldn't stay silent anymore. As soon as I saw Uncle James that morning, I told him everything. I didn't hold back. I told him about Millie, about the toys moving on their own, about her whispering to the darkness. I even told him about the pocket watch, how she had taken it from his drawer. At first, he just chuckled, dismissing it as my imagination running wild. But when I mentioned the pocket watch, his face changed. His eyes darkened, and his lips tightened into a thin line. He went quiet for a long moment, then finally spoke. "That watch, it's been in my family for generations," he said, his voice low. "I thought it was lost, though. I never told anyone about it, not even Millie." That night, things escalated. As I lay in bed, I heard a scream, a blood-curdling scream that echoed through the walls, sending a jolt of terror through my body. I shot up, rushing out of my room to find the source. I found Millie in my uncle's study, curled up in the corner, her eyes wide with terror. She was muttering incoherently, her hands shaking violently. "They won't let me leave," she cried, her voice cracked with fear. "The children, the shadows, they won't let me go." I didn't understand. What was she talking about? But my uncle did. He knelt beside her, his face pale and grim. "The orphanage," he whispered, his voice shaking. "The souls of the children who died here, they've never left. They were abandoned, forgotten, but they don't forget." I could see the terror in Millie's eyes as she repeated the same words, over and over again. The children in the shadows. That was the last time Uncle James stepped foot in Shadow Hill. He took Millie and fled, leaving the house behind. It was never spoken of again, but the rumors about Shadow Hill persisted. They said the souls of the orphaned children still haunted the halls, vengeful and angry. They sought retribution against those who dared to steal from them, to betray them. As for Millie, I heard whispers in town. They said she was never the same. The woman who had once been so kind, so eager to please, was now a shell herself, lost in the grip of madness. What happened to her? I'll never know for sure. But I do know this. The children in the shadows didn't just want to punish thieves and liars. They wanted to make sure no one ever forgot them again. And Shadow Hill? It remains abandoned to this day.